What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central podcast. And the New York Mets are advancing to the NLCS. If you told us this months ago, we wouldn't have believed you. If you even said this to me 2-3 weeks ago, I would have said that you're lying your ass off. There's no way that they even got to the postseason. But here we are, and they are here in the NLCS to face the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's why we waited to do the podcast, because we could have done one maybe to just strictly recap the Phillies one, but we figured, you know what, let's just give it all in one shot, recap the Philly series, talk about the series coming up against the Dodgers, talk about a little bit of other news that also dropped as David Stearns again just continues to cook. But we have a lot to get into. Before we do, leave a like on the live stream if you do enjoy. Subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're Ranger fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live on the channel. But we got a lot as it feels great to just beat the piss out of the Phillies, which honestly, this could have been a 3-game series. Like, the Mets were in control of the entire series, but the Phillies had their cute little win in game 2 because the bullpen imploded, which we'll get into more of that later on. But yeah, they had their cute little win, but the Mets, for the most part, were in control and just steamrolled them. A little bit of a scare in game 4 with the way the offense was, until Francisco Lindor, who has been there for the Mets all season long, did it again and gave probably, I mean, now you have a debate of what's the best moment for the Mets this postseason, the Alonso home run against Milwaukee or this one. I think a lot of people picked the grand slam that Lindor hit because it was at home and it sends them to the CS, but at least you have a debate, and this is what good baseball teams do. And yeah, I just, it couldn't have been, it's just so good to do this, because now that we can talk shit, I'm very happy to come on here and talk shit about the Phillies. It is so great to watch every single Phillies fan that thought this was going to be a cakewalk when Kyle Schwarber hit that leadoff home run in game 1, how they thought the series was wraps right then and there. But how do you feel after beating the Phillies, and how do you feel going into the series? Or give me your thoughts on the Philly series. We'll talk about the series coming up after.
I mean, what is it not to like? I mean, I said that we were going to go in there, we're going to take their cheesesteaks, and we're going to shove them up their ass, and that's what we did. Uh, Game 1, it started out and could have hit Zach Wheeler, but we knew the key going into this series was get to that Phillies bullpen. And the one thing that the Mets were able to do in that game 1 was outlast Zach Wheeler, which was huge. And the one thing that, we've seen about this Mets team is if you're going to beat them, you got to kill them early on, because this team is ruthless, and they've shown that it doesn't matter what the score is, they will come back and they will make it a game. That's what they did. They got to the bullpen. They got to Jeff Hoffman. They got the Matt Strahm. They had that big 5-run 8th inning, ended up winning that game 6-1. Game 2, you had the huge Mark Vientos game where he hits 2 big 2-run home runs. But unfortunately, the bullpen, like we said, blew it. I mean, even before then, you had the 3-0 lead. You had the first home run by Vientos to make it 2-0. Pete then adds on with another home run. By the way, Pete, right now, we've been saying that he was playing his way out of New York for the entire regular season. With the postseason he's having right now, he's easily, he's easily going to get a contract extension in this upcoming offseason to stay with the Mets. But hopefully he continues that on. But, you get out to the 3-0 lead in game 2. Then Sevy, who was dominating that game, by the way, just ran into the 6th inning and he usually does this where start off really good and then he'll get to a point where he just kind of loses it. Gives up the 2-run home run to Bryce Harper, and they're like, okay, 3-2, we still got a lead, just get out of the inning. Then he hangs a slider to Nick Castellanos to make it 3-3. Nimmo responds to make it 4-3, and then just the bullpen just didn't have it. Edwin Diaz came in, got the strikeout on Kyle Schwarber, and then he went through the top of the inning again and wasn't able to do it. Phillies came back. Vientos then again had the 2-run home run to tie it up, and then similar to what we saw in the Diaz inning, McGill just hangs a slider to Nick Castellanos. They win that game. They top the series 1-1. And while it was a bad loss, like I said, the Mets were still in a good place because they went into Philly and they split. And that was the main goal. Would it have been nice to take the first 2 games there and then only have to win one Citi Field? Yeah. but you split, you're in a good spot, and all you got to do is win your 2 home games. And that's what they did. They went back to Citi Field, right at October. Yeah, that's cool. But the Phillies really saw what orange October is, because Citi Field was rocking in those 2 games. The atmosphere was just insane. I know we went to game 3, you went to game 4, and I'm not sure which atmosphere was better in both of those games, but you know, the Citi Field was just insane. And this is what happens when Mets fans get a taste of good baseball and they get a good taste of postseason action. This is the type of atmosphere that we create in Citi Field. Citi Field just becomes a fortress, and it's hard for teams to come and play there. But you know, you win game 3 off the back of a brilliant performance by Sean Manaea again, who's once again shown that he's the ace of the staff. You got the home run from Pete, you got the home run from Winker, then you got the two big hits, the 2 RBI hit from Marte and from Iglesias. They eventually close the game out, and then we get to game 4, got to win one more game, and game 4 it was so frustrating to watch because they had Ranger Suarez on the ropes. You load the bases up in the first inning, can't get nothing there. You load the bases up in the second inning, can't get nothing there. Jose Quintana, by the way, who has pitched great in this postseason, kept the Mets in that game. They were only down 1-0. And then once again, the Mets got to the Phillies bullpen. And Francisco Lindor, with the bases loaded up again, who Lindor's had a pretty good postseason, he just at that point didn't have that big hit like what Pete did in game 3 of the wild card. But bases loaded with Carlos Estevez in, throws a fastball right down the middle, and Lindor just puts it over the bullpen wall to put the Mets up 4-1. And at that point, you had a good feeling that the Mets were going to take this series. David Peterson comes in, he pitches great. And then, of course, Edwin Diaz comes in, makes it interesting because of course he has to, walks the first 2 guys, but gets a couple strikes out, and then, of course, strikes out Kyle Schwarber to end that game and to send the Mets to the NLCS. Look, now a tough matchup against the Dodgers, a little rematch of 1988. Hopefully we can get our revenge of this time. Obviously, we beat them the last 2 times in the playoffs in the 2006 NLDS and beating them in the 2015 NLDS. But, this time the roster is completely different. Nobody's on that team now. And, yeah, I mean, look, 4 wins away from the World Series. 4 wins away from getting to the World Series. If you told me that at the start of the season, I would have been like, yeah, sure, maybe. But now that we're actually here, I want to win this whole thing. I want to win this whole thing. And it's a tough series, but I really do believe that if the Mets can get past the Dodgers, and this is no disrespect to the Yankees or to the Tigers or the Guardians, who is playing Game 5 right now to face the Yankees in the NLCS, I do believe that if we beat the Dodgers and we get to the World Series, I do believe that we'll finish the job.
Yeah, I have that similar opinion that I think whoever comes out of the NL at this rate is going to win the World Series. It could be entirely wrong. I've been wrong before, so who the hell knows? And to answer the little question you threw in there of which atmosphere is better, since I got to be at both, I would say Game 3 was better the whole way through. And I think a lot of it was because of the hype that it was the first playoff game at Citi Field that is like meaningful. Because do we really want to count 2022? Because the crowd kind of had a weird vibe to it that year. Like, it started off on fire, don't get me wrong, in 2022, but it died off quickly because everyone knew that, like, we shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be playing this series. We should have the bye right now waiting to play the Phillies or the Cardinals. But that didn't end up being the case, and that was like the first game. But I will say, I think that with this crowd, there was just nervous tension building up because I think the start of the game, and especially when they were loading the bases left and right, it was on fire, and then it just died because every single time they just did not come through until they did when Lindor got that. And then when Lindor got that grand slam on Game 4, the atmosphere of Game 4 topped any sporting event I've ever been to. I mean, the way that it was celebrated, there was beer flying everywhere in the stadium. Like, it was bonkers in that place. And to see them finally celebrate on home field and to see that with my own eyes was just freaking special. And I hope that they somehow could get it done here in, 5 games or so we could do it all over again. But or even 4 if they want to just, mess around sweep. I wouldn't complain either. But obviously that's, we'll talk about that stuff like prediction wise and everything. But yeah, I mean, you took advantage of a team that honestly looked very vulnerable. I mean, there is so many guys for the Phillies. And the beauty about this too is you got Phillies media now talking about how they got to break up the core and all that other stuff because they had JT Realmuto who didn't get a hit. Alec Boehm, I have never seen a bigger crybaby in my life with the way that he was acting, both playing defense and as well as with the bat. I mean, his body language the entire series was just terrible. The only guys that showed up for them really were Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, Zach Wheeler, and maybe you could give credit to their other starters and Sanchez, but again, I feel like the Mets got to him a good amount, but still, you could give credit there. Nola, do you really give credit to? Because the Mets had him on the ropes a couple of times. They just didn't really pounce on it. I mean, that game could have been more of a blowout than a 7-2 final score. And then Ranger Suarez, they had him on the ropes a couple of times. So, but again, you do give credit where it's due that he got out of those jams. But outside of that, they had nobody. I mean, Trey Turner, where was that guy for them? Bryson Stott did nothing. Brandon Marsh really did nothing. And you look at their bullpen, which was supposedly the best in baseball with the rankings that came out before the season, and nobody impressed me from their bullpen at all. And this could also be a thing, though, that the Mets have something on these other teams' bullpens, which we'll talk about, because the Brewers are another team that supposedly had this lights-out bullpen, and the Mets, we saw them take advantage of guys like Payamps and Williams on multiple occasions, and we saw it here because Hoffman, he did nothing for them. Kerkering, he wasn't great for them, we got to thank Rob Thompson, though, for the way he managed that last game, because he left Hoffman in for way too long, then brings in Estevez, who was shaky the last time out either way, and they end up getting to him as well. Strahm, I mean, congrats to him having a good game 4, but outside of that, nothing. Alvarado was useless. I mean, they had nothing going for their bullpen. And then again, their lineup, once you got past Harper and Castellanos, I mean, it was free outs. It was free outs. And I had the fear in me of guys like Realmuto just because of the past where they've done so much damage to this team, especially against Edwin Diaz with Realmuto, where I have that PTSD, but they really didn't do anything. I mean, Realmuto didn't have a hit the entire series. And Schwarber, what did he do outside of game 1? I mean, outside of that leadoff home run he got, he was a no-show. I'm pretty sure he went 0-4 outside of that. So, again, you did this pitching staff, though, is where you got to give a lot of the credit to, like you mentioned, because Kodai Senga, we'll start with the starters in general. Kodai Senga only gives 2 innings, but you could easily lose yourself after the first batter and you let up the leadoff home run. He could easily get all over the place and lose his composure and everything, but he dialed in and kept the Phillies at bay, where if the Phillies started to pile on more runs because Senga lost his confidence, that could have hurt badly. You go to game 2, Severino was great until he wasn't, which you could argue still that he should have been out of the game at the point that he was still in, considering the fact that there is that thing that after the 5th inning, he does struggle. And you could have argued that he should have been out of there after the Harper at bat. And then you go to game 3, like you mentioned with Manaea. I mean, he is just pitching like an ace. And then you got Phillies media outlets talking about how he's not that good and all this other stuff. The guy's probably going to finish like top 10 in Cy Young, but I guess he's not good. I guess not. And that's with him starting terrible in April and May, mind you. And he still is going to get Cy Young votes. And then you have Quintana, who everybody doubted. And he's another one where bent but didn't break because things got shaky for him in the 4th inning it was. And he managed to get out of the jam there. And then you get to the MVP underratedly of all of this. Like, obviously, you talk about Lindor, Vientos on the bats. The MVP of all of this is David Peterson. I mean, he was nails out of the pen in game 1, nails out of the pen in game 4, to the point where I honestly wanted to leave him in. As much as, you probably want to go to Diaz because of the fact that he is your best reliever. You want to close the game there and all the other stuff. I get it. But I felt there was a strong argument to leave Peterson in with the way he was pitching and not go to Edwin Diaz. But either way, I mean, he did good. And credit even then to Edwin Diaz, who did bounce back. But most of all, credit to Lindor because, I mean, how many times have we joked and talked about how every time there's a mound visit with Hefner, it's like Lindor is doing all the talking? There was that clip going around of Lindor being like, stop saying let's go, stop saying that, and just do it. Just do the freaking job. And all of a sudden, he starts chucking his fastball more. We saw his fastest pitch since 2022 to end the game. That, to me, instills confidence for me, at least as a fan, next time Diaz is out there, which I know a lot of people still won't feel confident based on the way the past few outings have went. But I feel more confident knowing he was able to dial it up. And to us, we said it last podcast, the fix was simple with Diaz. This wasn't a complicated thing to where he's just bad all of a sudden. All they had to do was have him utilize his fastball more. And what do you know? He started utilizing it and he ended up performing better. But yeah, I mean, outside that with the pitching, it sucks that I think McGill was fine in that inning he pitched. Budo, there's worries for me. Maton, I'm worried about, but Stanek, I mean, Stanek is a freaking dog right now. And again, I know that he allowed a run in game one, but still, I feel comfortable enough with him. But what are your overall thoughts with the pitching staff?
No, I thought the pitching staff was excellent. I mean, I think you bring up a good point that David Peterson was probably easy the MVP of this series just because, he had to come in after Kodai Senga gives you two really good innings, gives up the one home run to Kyle Schwarber, but was able to settle down, keep it only at 1-0. And Peterson just comes in and as the bulk guy, I mean, he really didn't get into any trouble really. And he just kept that game afloat and kept the Mets in it until they were able to outlast Zach Wheeler and get to that Phillies bullpen. And then, of course, after Jose Quintana gives you a really good fifth inning, he comes in, gives you 2 1/3 innings, and bridges the gap to get you to Edwin Diaz, and then Sean Manaea again, excellent. I mean, like we've stated before, that if we get to the offseason and Sean Manaea, his contract, the contract that he wants, if it makes sense financially and in terms of years, I think they got to bring him back because if you're going into the next year with Sean Manaea as your third or fourth starter, I mean, that's just excellent rotation depth. And that's got to be one of the best third or fourth starters in the MLB, probably the whole MLB if you take a look at other starting rotations. But yeah, and then the bullpen. I mean, look, was it shaky at times? Yes. I think going back to the Edwin Diaz point, I think if Diaz blew that game 4, I would have had a hard time trusting him because I'm like, okay, like game 2, okay, like you strike out Schwarber, then you kind of get shaky and you don't challenge Bryce Harper. And then obviously Casti, I mean, the one thing that we were saying with Diaz, like you were saying, like he has to utilize his fastball, and he was way too slider heavy in that outing in game 2. And it's like, you are a $20 million a year closer. You make over $100 million. Go out there and use your best pitch, which again is the fastball, because you see when Diaz fastball is on, it's unhittable, and he's able to hit 101, 102, 100 at a consistent rate. And I really like that mound visit by Lindor, because he was just saying, bro, just go out there and use your best pitch. And it worked, because after he walked the first 2 guys and after he started using his fastball more, he really looked like he was really more in command. And that now gives me more hope that, if when we see Diaz again, whether that's game 1, game 2, whenever we see him in the NLCS, I'm hoping that, now he has that fastball unlocked, and now his confidence is at another level. And then, we'll hopefully see 2022 Diaz out there. And similar to what, when we talk about with the Dodgers, the key, like we were saying about the Phillies, is you got to shut down their top of the order. And the same applies to the LA Dodgers, because their top of the order is probably even better than the Phillies. Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Castellanos, that's good. But you look at the top of the order for the Dodgers, you got Ohtani, you got Betts, you got Freeman, you got Teoscar. That's a tough top four right there. Not to mention that you also have, Max Muncy, Will Smith, TK Hernandez, and guys like that. It's going to be tough. And the key to beating those guys is you have to challenge them with the fastball. You can't dance around these guys because that order is so deep that they're going to beat you somewhere else. So Diaz just has to go in there, use his fastball, and shut down the top of the order for this series.
Yeah, and to shift gears with another reliever, to build off of the conversation here, Phil Maton, because I brought him up. I want to talk about the fact also that how many times did we mention here as well? You cannot have Phil Maton go against the top of the order because every single time you are asking him to fail. If you continue to put him out there against the best of the best, a soft tossing pitcher, you are asking to lose. And I hope that that's finally getting to Mendoza's head. I mean, even looking at an example of the way the Dodgers utilize their bullpen, because I was doing a little bit of my scouting with Game 5, if you will. They were using Evan Phillips in like the 6th, 7th inning because it was the better part of the order. And then they put in, they put in like Blake Trinan against a different part of the order. Like that's how they have to manage this bullpen in this series. And I'm sure they will. And I think even then, I mean, Dave Roberts made a questionable move there. Like with the way Kopech was dealing, I was surprised they didn't just leave him in the game. But I get it. You only get one off day. And I think the Mets in general with their pitching staff having these 4 days or 3-4 days off, whatever, to get their pitching staff right. Like Edwin Diaz, I mean, he has thrown a bunch of pitches. David Peterson lately, he's thrown a bunch of pitches. He at least could give these guys some rest. And that was another reason closing the series out was crucial. But yeah, I want to get to some comments before they're irrelevant to the conversation. But Yuki saying already counting my chickens before I hatch a Subway Series. We'll see about that. Will say Mets? Luca, what's going on? 8 games away from being 2024 champs. Easier said than done. Hard to believe we're here, but Mets should beat the Dodgers in 5. Let's go Mets. We'll give our predictions later on. They sat Stott in Game 3, and that's another thing. I mean, they sat Stott and they sat Bohm in these games. Alec Bohm is even more hilarious. A guy who was in the home run derby and in his breakout year was getting benched in the playoffs. I mean, that's like the equivalent with the Rangers with Capo Caco, how they freaking bench him in the playoffs in breakout years. So, and yeah, fair with that, but it's not like every dominant reliever has been lights out against the Mets. And yeah, this too, their secondary guys were terrible. I mean, Rojas, Sosa, Hayes, those guys were just terrible for them. And if there's a Subway Series and the Mets win, I'll go crazy. You and I both. Manaea should pitch the first game. They already announced the pitching rotation, which we'll talk about, and why Mets fans thinking the Dodgers are going to roll us over. Well, we'll talk about all that. Do we have anything else to say about the Philly series, though, before we wrap it up at all? Yeah, do you have anything to say?
No, I think we just handled them, and we show that New York is the superior city. I mean, the Knicks showed it back in April, and the Mets showed it once again. So, listen, we'll meet again next season, but until then, we got this round.
Yeah, and it does feel great. The only thing I wish is we took over the bank as much as we took over the Wells Fargo Center with the Knicks. But yeah, the last thing I'll say is they pretty much did what I expected, honestly, with the series, because I did say Mets in 4. The only difference is I flip game 1 and 2, but they did what I expected in terms of how they needed to beat them. Once you got to that bullpen, and everybody overrated the hell out of their bullpen. They have some nice names back there, but given the fact that their starting pitchers are of the stature that they are, I always said, get to their bullpen and you could beat them, and they did that, and they ended up winning because of that.
And I was going to say one more thing. The Mets in this series really showed the recipe on how to win in the postseason. Good pitching, timely hitting, and good defense too. We can't forget about the good defense, because if we recall Game 3 when Alec Bohm hit that ball into right center field, and Tyrone Taylor made that nice play, cut it off, threw it over to Iglesias at second to get him out. I mean, this is the epitome of David Stern's baseball right here. This is how he builds his teams: good pitching, timely hitting, and good defense. And another thing that in this series, because if we recall back to the wildcard series, the Mets in that series only hit one home run, which is that 3-run shot by Pete in Game 3. Well, I mean, if you looked in this series, Game 1, they didn't hit any home runs. It was all singles, but they were able to win that game. Game 3, you got the 2 home runs by Vientos, you got the Pete home run, you got the Nimmo home run, 4. Then you got 2 more in Game 3 to make that 6, the Pete and the Winker one, and then you got the one by Lindor. So they've hit 7 home runs in the series, which is huge because, like we said, the key to winning games in the postseason, you got to hit home runs, you got to hit the long ball. And right now they're doing it, and they got to continue against the Dodgers because this Dodgers team, they hit a lot of home runs too. So the Mets gotta counter that by just continuing to hit the long ball in this series.
Yeah, and I think that is a good segue. If I'm gonna throw one more thing about the series in there, if I had to have one single gripe about anything with the series, I want to see Mendoza utilize Jesse Winker a bit more because I think there were too many times, like, I know Martinez got the hit in the 6th inning to start that rally where Lindor got the grand slam, but I felt that was a spot where Winker should have been in the game, pinch hitting. Again, that's nitpicking little things, but just my last tidbit. But we'll segue. And speaking of David Stearns, a little bit of news that dropped as this is from Andy Koska. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that last name wrong, but saying Ken Guthrie, the Orioles scout who signed Jackson Holliday, Heston Kjerstad, and Creed Williams, has departed the organization for a position with the Mets. So just thought I'd sprinkle it in before we get into the heavy conversation here about the series. Good move. That's all I could say. I trust David Stearns with whatever he's doing. He's in 1 year gave me a reason to believe, because in 1 year he has made this an 89-win team. So I have a reason to believe and have faith. So, yeah, good hire. I mean, a guy that got and scouted all of those guys. Granted, Jackson Holliday was kind of like a consensus #1 pick, but still, good work. Why the hell not? Why not? And again, you got to trust Stearns.
No, yeah, I mean, look, I never heard of the guy, but I'm trusting David Stearns here, and by the names that he scouted, I mean, like you said, Jackson Holliday was already a consensus first overall pick, but Heston Kjerstad was a good find, and I don't know much about Creed Williams, but yeah, you just gotta trust in Stearns. Whatever move he seems to make works out, and whatever move doesn't work out for him, which is rare, he just gets rid of. Because no need to fuck around. Let's be ruthless. If something doesn't work, let's just get rid of it easily. And this is why you gotta love David Stearns.
Yeah, and the Orioles are just like one of the smarter teams in baseball, so taking from them right now isn't a bad thing. But we'll move on now to the Dodger series, where there is a lot to talk about here. Whether you want to talk about the rotation, whether you want to talk about the roster, because we don't know the roster. That's the only thing that sucks about doing this today versus tomorrow, but tomorrow probably wouldn't be a good day to do this because football is going to be on, and if we did it around this time, no one would watch. But as of right now, so we'll start with the rotation before we segue into like the roster itself, because there is a conversation to be had here. The rotation that was announced is Kodai Senga is going to pitch game 1, and then Sean Manaea is going to pitch game 2. We do not know who will pitch game 3 and game 4, but I think if I was a betting man, it's safe to say Severino then would get game 3, and then Quintana would get game number 4. And the only reason I could see Quintana not getting game number 4 is if there's, God forbid, the event that the Mets are down 3-0 in the series, which let's pray to God that's not the case, and I don't think it will get to that. But in the event that it does, that's the only time I think maybe we'll see a shift in the rotation. If I was to argue with anything, I would have maybe put Manaea in game 1, but I also understand because you want him to be ready in the event there's a game 6 or game 7 over prioritizing a game 5 unless that becomes a closeout. But there's also the conversation that maybe Mania would be available in a game 5 if they're up 3-0 in the series, or 3-1 rather, and they have a chance to close it out. Maybe Mania is available in that event. But what are your thoughts with the rotation? I mean, if I quite frankly don't hate it. I mean, it is what it is. I trust whatever at this point. But if I was to say, just like run through it in my head, those were some things I thought of.
I don't have a problem with the rotation. I mean, look, everybody's performed equally well so far through the playoffs. I mean, I get I get the argument that you could have started Shamanai in game 1, get off on the good start. He gives you some innings, you maybe rest some bullpen pieces if what's it called? If he gets a long outing, and then potentially, you use those guys in game 2 to potentially go up 2-0. But I think having that safety net of having Shamanai in game 2, I think that does help. Just in case you do drop game 1. But I think uh, I think the thing with Senga then going to Peterson, I think that could work. I mean, I'm interested to see how much longer Senga's going to go in this outing, because I would hope that he could maybe give him 3 to 4 innings this time instead of 2. Because if he gives you 4 innings, and then you could tally that off the back of maybe 3 innings by Mania, that's 7 innings, and then you could go either however you want to. You want to either go to Stan Diaz or Maton Diaz, like however they want to do it. But yeah, like I said, I don't have a problem with it. Would I've liked to see Shamanai in game 1? Yes, but right now I'm trusting that Senga Peterson combination that they used in game 1 of the Phillies series. And then yeah, I do expect Sevy's going to get the ball in game 3. Quintana will then get the ball in game 4.
That kind of segues into the bigger conversation here. So, Jeff McNeil might be back in the fold, as he's been taking live pitching in the fall league and got a hit yesterday. I don't know if he did any more, but regardless, it's looking like things are pointing to him being on the roster, and I don't love it, but I don't hate it. Like, I get that you get a left-handed bat in here that brings versatility, but the only problem I have is, what is his role going to be? Because right now, what's the vision for him? Because are you not going to be playing Iglesias every day? Maybe that's the scenario where it is, because if not, he's not DHing. I mean, you have something with Winker and JD right now. He's not playing any of the outfield positions, probably. Like, I just don't know what they see with McNeil. Like, right now, I value Acuna more, because I value a guy that is in late in the games for defense, that brings speed. The only argument that I could think of here is if you remove someone from the pitching staff, and I still don't think it's the worst idea. And maybe you could do a little roster manipulation here, because maybe you don't activate McNeil for game 1 or game 2. Maybe you wait for like a game 3, because I don't think that's against the rules. I mean, I think if a guy's coming back from an injury, you could activate him in the middle of the series and then send a guy down. I could be wrong on that. So if that's not the case, then forget it. But if you can do that, in the event you can, maybe the Mets decide to keep like a Danny Young around, and they use him in game 1 or game 2, and then Danny Young, thank you for your service, off the roster, and they add an extra bat, because at least they're getting some innings out of a guy like Danny Young, who they haven't used, or Adam Ottavino, which the Dodgers have a lot of speed on the bases. I don't hate the idea of taking Ottavino off the roster, especially because they will run a field day on Ottavino. Because either way, right now, I mean, they've solved the problem that we complained about for so long, that there was no innings eaters in the bullpen. Now you have 2 of them with McGill as well as Peterson, to where I'm not worried if you remove Danny Young, or if you remove Adam Ottavino. And I'm pretty sure the Mets are the only team that's carrying an extra arm anyway right now in their bullpen. So other teams are doing it, and it's fine. So I don't hate if they do it, but what are your thoughts on that? Who would you remove from the roster? To answer that for myself, I would say Ottavino, because I think Acuna still has value right now.
Well, before we get into that, we actually did just get some news. Bob Nightingale said that Jack Flaherty will be the game one starter for the LA Dodgers, so it will be Senga versus Flaherty in game one tomorrow night.
Okay.
For McNeil, I'm neither for it nor against it. Like I'm in the middle. Like I see the case for both sides. I think that if they're gonna bring in McNeil, like I don't like they're not gonna sit Jose Iglesias because Jose Iglesias has deserved that spot at second base. I do think that if they're gonna utilize McNeil, I do think it will be one of the outfield positions. And here is why, because we saw in the wild card series that Tyrone Taylor played all three of the first. He played all three games. Then he played in game one, and then we saw that he was on the bench for game two, and Harrison Bader got the start. Now, my thinking is that instead of putting in Bader there and then having a guy that his bat's not great, he's not going to hit for power or for contact or for nothing. He's just the guy that's there. So my thinking is if you're gonna have McNeil there, you could slide Nimmo over to center field, and then McNeil can go into left. Now I understand that that's gonna hurt the outfield defense a little bit because Nimmo is not the best center fielder, but McNeil is also a pretty good left fielder too. So I don't think it's gonna drastically hurt the defense, but I think you will see a little bit worse defense. And I mean, look, McNeil, he's not the same guy that he was in 2022 or 2019, but I'd still rather McNeil's bat up there than Harrison Bader. So that's where I see him being utilized. That if he comes back, and then I mean, like I said, even if he's a bench bat, he could come in for a pinch hitting option, or if you want for late game defense, also you can bring in McNeil, and you could also do it in the infield or in the outfield. But with the pitching staff, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because right now the Mets have two guys in their bullpen, which they don't utilize, and frankly, what's the point of having two guys in your bullpen that's just there? Like Ottavino hasn't been used, and I don't want to use Ottavino in any situation because pretty much if they're using Ottavino, it's pretty much in a game where they're down big and they don't want to waste any arms. And then Danny Young's there, and like I don't know why they haven't used Danny Young because there has been a couple spots where big time lefties have come up the bat, and they haven't used them. And I look at this series again where you're gonna have spots where lefties do come up. Otani's up there. And you're gonna have Freddie Freeman. Now, look, ideally, do you want Danny Young up against Otani and Freddie Freeman? No, but if you need a lefty out there to get you outs, like I mean, for me, I put in Danny Young. I know down the stretch he wasn't great, but the Mets have rested them, and then I'm hoping that rest then will help him, and then we'll see a much better Danny Young in this playoff series if we do see him. But I mean, the guy that I will leave off the roster is just Ottavino because I see no use for Ottavino. At least, like I said, for Danny Young, if you have to, you can use him as a lefty option out of the bullpen.
And he also could give more innings, I feel like,
Yeah.
versus Ottavino, where, God forbid you're getting blown out in one of these games. At least Danny Young, you could feed him to the Wolves for 2 innings. And, I mean, he's well rested enough to the point where it doesn't matter. Ottavino, I mean, you're lucky if you get 1 inning out of him more times than not. You're sure as hell not getting 2. But yeah, we'll segue into now the conversation of how you beat this team because we've been, I'd say we've been pretty spot on with our analysis of both of these series thus far. But with the series, the way that I think you expose the Dodgers and exploit them because there's not a lot of weaknesses on this team, obviously, because they're in the championship series for a reason. They finished with the record they did for a reason. They are one of the best teams in baseball for a reason. But if you're going to exploit them anywhere, it is their starting pitching. And you look at the way the Padres won their 2 games. Walker Buehler is like hot garbage right now. Jack Flaherty has not been particularly great. But then you go to their bullpen, and their bullpen, they have 2 halves of the bullpen like most bullpens do. They have their half where it is lights out, and that is your Daniel Hudson, that is your Blake Trinan, your Michael Kopech, as well as your Evan Phillips. And then they have the other side of the bullpen where they have guys like Brazier, Grove, like the weaker part of their bullpen. You have to jump on these starting pitchers early. Like, you have to do that. And this is where the bullpen has to lock in for the Mets because you cannot afford, and this is where Mendoza has a lot of pressure too to put the bullpen arms in the right situation because once you get that lead, you can't get too complacent. You can't, and the bullpen's going to have to be utilized in the right spot, because the other part where you could exploit this team is the lower part of their lineup. And I know Max Muncy's been like a solid player against the Mets his entire career. And Will Smith has kind of been like not that great for them. And even with some of their other names like Betts and Ohtani and Freeman's not playing 100% right now. Like, there are guys like Teoscar's probably their best bat, arguably, right now, with the way that his health is and just the way they swing in the bat out of anyone else in their lineup. And that's not to take away from what Ohtani and Betts could do. I don't want to diminish that. And of course, Freddie Freeman, who has notoriously been a Mets killer, I'm not diminishing what those guys could do, but just based on what we've seen through 5 games of the postseason thus far. But you could exploit good like parts of that lineup as well. And that's where, again, it's on Mendoza to find the right matchups for these guys, because if you're putting Ottavino in against guys like Tommy Edman and against, even the lower part of the lineup, this is why he should not be on the roster, because, if he puts a guy like Tommy Edman on base, that's a guy that could steal bases and run amok on him, and then they're going to steal runs from you. So the way, though, that you mainly exploit them is that starting pitching. And could they exploit the bullpen? Yeah, because their bullpen, as much as it's been lights out, we've seen the Mets pick apart bullpens before. I mean, we've seen them do it all season long. I don't root for injuries, but Vesia is one of their better relievers, and it looks like he might be out of commission for a bit. So there is that. So their lefty now, like their primary lefty, is going to be former Met Anthony Banda, which, of course, he goes to the Dodgers, and now he's just like freaking great. But realistically, that's a guy that you should be able to get to every now and then. So it's going to be interesting. I think that this team, I don't know, the Dodgers, they're just such a weird team this year. They are such a weird team. I'm feeling good that the Mets take the series. I'm obviously going to be biased and pick them. But listen, if the Dodgers win, I wouldn't be surprised. They are, again, like I mentioned, one of the best teams in baseball for a reason. They have all this star talent. It wouldn't surprise me. But I'm leaning either, I still can't make a decision, and I've been spot on, so I probably should make a pick. I'm leaning either Mets in 5 or Mets in 6 here. I keep going back and forth because there is this part of me, especially with Jack Flaherty starting game 1, I feel like that's a guy that you should pick apart twice, and you would play him twice within the first 5 games. And you can't obviously say it's a lock to win 2 games because that offense could do whatever. And who knows, maybe the Mets offense doesn't do that great, which would be even more concerning because there were problems in the end of the Philly series. But, assuming that you could split in LA, you could win 2 out of 3 in your own ballpark at least. I like your odds to win this thing in 6. So I'll say, if I had to lean towards something, I'll say Mets in 6.
Yeah, no, I think the key to beat him is, like you were saying, first of all, you got to, like I was saying before, you got to shut down that top of the order like they did with the Phillies. You got to shut down Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, and Teoscar Hernandez to the best of your ability. And listen, that's going to be tough because obviously Ohtani, he's going to win the MVP this year. Should be Lindor, but whatever. Lindor's had his big home run this year, and he's looking at bigger objectives anyway. Like you said, he wants to win a World Series. Listen, Mookie Betts has shown that he's one of the best MLB. He's one of the best players in the league. And then of course Freddie Freeman. He's playing with a compromised ankle right now, but we all know Freddie from his time with the Braves, and he doesn't like us. We don't like him, and he's going to be looking to try his best to beat us. Then Teoscar Hernandez is just a good overall baseball player with a lot of power in that bat. And then, so yeah, you got to shut down those guys at the top of the order, and then you got to get the starting rotation because Yamamoto, while he has shown that he can be good, if you get to him early and you pull him out of the game, because he has shown that he really hasn't gone too far into games so far. So if you force him out of the games early and then you force Dave Roberts to use that bullpen more, you get more looks off of those guys, and then you tire those guys out more. Jack Flaherty, he's been a good ad for them at the trade deadline. Hasn't been the same guy that he has been in Detroit so far, but he's still a pretty good option. And then of course Walker Buehler has just not been the same guy that he was over the past couple of years. He got hit hard in Game 3 against San Diego. he was able to settle down. But if you get to Walker Buehler early, like what the Padres did, they were able to get out and then they were able to close that game out eventually, even though the Dodgers did make it a close game. But yeah, I mean, you just want to get after that starting rotation. Obviously, I don't know who their fourth starter is going to be, because even in Game 4 of the last series where they played the Padres, they went with a bullpen game in Game 4 and they were able to win that. So I mean, if they're able to go for a bullpen game, that's just, once again, you're able to see more of those guys, and again, you're going to tire them out a bit more. So, I mean, that's only a benefit for the Mets right there. But I mean, look, that bullpen is pretty good, like we were saying, with Evan Phillips, Kopech, trying, and obviously Vase is hurt, so let's see what happens with him, and Daniel Hudson. So it is a tough bullpen, but like we were saying, the Mets have shown an ability to get to these key guys. I mean, they beat Devin Williams in the Brewers series. They were able to get big hits off guys like Estevez, Strahm, Hoffman in the Phillies series, and then even in the last 2 games of the regular season against the Braves, they were able to get the Raisel Iglesias and start that big rally to propel them to win that game. But yeah, I think the key to this series, and like what they did in the Philly series, I think they got to split in LA, get this back to Citi Field, tied 1-1. I think they take 2 out of 3 in Citi Field, and I think they finish this off in Game 6. So my prediction is Mets in 6, and we'll be going to the World Series.
I like that. Yeah, I think we're on a similar wavelength with that, and yeah, I agree with all that. And an underrated X factor that is going to play a role in this series that I think needs to be talked about is the importance of Jesse Winker, because this is a team that is predominantly right-handed, especially with Vesia now getting hurt, making the lone lefty of their entire pitching staff, starters, bullpen, Anthony Banda's their lone lefty. Jesse Winker, there's a world he's going to be the DH very often. I think that's also why there's some urgency to get Jeff McNeil back, because of the fact that we know that this team loves to put in the lefties against the righties. I think that there is a world where, I think that's your X factor potentially there. And just like the Phillies too, and just like the Brewers even, I mean, I think that our pitching staff having a good amount of lefties is going to only benefit us with how many lefties they have in their lineup. So it's one of those things where there are things to like about this matchup, because they have, like, some of their best bats are left-handed bats, whether it is Shohei Ohtani, whether it's Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, who could do damage in the lower part of the lineup, Gavin Lux. There are a good amount of lefties in their lineup. They don't have it with their pitching. I think Jesse Winker is going to be a huge X factor, and I think that Minaya and Quintana need to be nails in their starts. They have to, and right now, I have no reason to not believe in both of them. I mean, both of them, especially Minaya, obviously, but even Quintana right now, I mean, right now, he's giving me all the reason in the world to have faith in him. So, for right now, I feel comfortable by the optics of it. And if you want to look as well with the series against the Padres even, they really thrived mostly off of Dylan Cease, that offense. Like, if you want a comfortability factor going into the series, a lot of the damage they did was against Dylan Cease, because Game 2, they no-showed really offensively. Game 3, they got to the Padres pitching, but Michael King had probably the worst start he has had in a Padres uniform, honestly. Like, he's been very good for them, but he was not good at all in that start, following up what was one of the best starts, ironically, he's ever had. But they still won that game because of the way the Padres bats are. And I think this Mets lineup, there's an argument that they are that deep to the point where they are comparable a bit to the Padres. Maybe the Padres, you could argue, have a bit deeper of a lineup, but you have to remember, I mean, Jackson Merrill wasn't doing anything really for them. You have to remember that Arias no-showed for them. Like, they had a lot of guys no-showed. Right now, the Mets 1 through 9 are, like, firing on all cylinders, and even though you look at the numbers of guys like Iglesias and JD, they are getting timely hits here and there. And then Game 3, Darvish shoved. I mean, he was great. He just made 2 mistakes, and the offense didn't have an answer. Like, if you told me that Darvish was going to have the type of start he did going into that Game 5, I'm like, okay, we're facing the Padres in the NLCS then for sure. But the bats went ice cold. So if you want a comfortability factor, It is the fact that I think the Mets bats are better than the Padres in terms of the consistency and timely hits, and the fact that the Dodgers were getting most of their offense off of Dylan Cease. Now, will they have something on one of our guys? I don't know, but we have to remember Dylan Cease only went on 3 days of rest in that game 4 where he got absolutely shelled. And game 1, obviously, he had the rest, so a little concerning there. But if you want comfortability, you could chalk it up to the fact that, okay, they couldn't get to you, Darvish. Michael King, after that, once they got to the bullpen, which sometimes your bullpen just has to win you games, like, there are ways to shut down this offense. And I think that gives me and other Met fans a little bit of a more comfortable feeling. Obviously, you don't want to get too comfortable and too complacent here, because this lineup, like I alluded to before, could do anything at any moment, but I like our chances here. I really do.
No, yeah, I think just how deep this lineup is. Like we said, I think if they could just get to that starting rotation, the Dodgers starting rotation, and they see that bullpen a bunch of times, and they're able to see a bunch of pitches from Trinan, from Phillips, from Kopech. I think that this team is good enough to just do damage. And I think, going back to what we were saying, I think, with Senga starting in game 1, I think if they could find a way to take game 1, that'd be huge, because then you have Manaea in there, and then I trust Manaea to have a big game 2. And if they could go back to Citi Field with a 2-0 series lead, and then you just got to win 2 out of 3 at home, like, I like their chances. But like I was saying, just right now, find a way to split in LA, and then get back to Citi Field, and then we'll go from there.
I was going to say, if they go up 2-0 going back to Citi Field, it'd be very hard to imagine they lose, but I do also have 2-0 series lead PTSD, so I don't want to say that it would be a lock. But unrelated, I just saw something on Twitter as I was scrolling through, as maybe there's another X factor someone found here. Guess that X factor.
On the Mets?
Yes.
It was a position player or a pitcher?
It's a pitcher.
An X factor.
If you want a hint, I said he was an X factor last series against the Phillies because of the numbers.
I forgot. Budo. I don't know.
Tyler McGill.
Okay.
It's a 5 plate appearances, but Shohei Ohtani's 0 for 5 against Tyler McGill. So maybe he's a bit of an X factor here. Who the hell knows? But at the end of the day, I mean, this pitching staff collectively is going to have to be sharp. And listen, it is amazing to even think about, with the way that we're talking with this bullpen of how it's been shaky at times, that they're here. If they just could dial it up and have the best 2 weeks that we've seen from them since, like, what was it, August/September, when this bullpen was lights out, have that type of run again, you're world champions. Easier said than done, but have that type of freaking run. But yeah, I think we both have a similar feeling with the series. We both say Mets in 6, but if they take 2, I mean, you got to win it at home at that point. At that point, I feel like there's no excuse to not finish the job at least in 5 games. I feel like you got to close it out then. But Dave in the chat, assuming McNeil is on the NLCS roster, do you immediately start him, or do you keep riding with the lineup you've had and have him come off the bench with depth? Good question.
The bench.
You say the bench. I would say the bench, but if you're asking me how I think they're going to utilize him, I think they're gonna start him. I think they start him because I think that they're gonna view it the way that I said, where there are so many righties in that pitching staff, and they're gonna want the lefties to go out there. They're gonna want the lefties to go out there and do the thing. Like, you're gonna see a lot of Jesse Winker. You're gonna see a lot of McNeil. I think you're going to see a lot of those guys versus, and again, that's why I think there's urgency to activate McNeil. I don't think they'd be this urgent if they weren't going to utilize him that much. So I say they're going to start him, but I would personally put him on the bench, and it is
Pull
2-3-2. Dave,
pull up this Edgar's guy comment. What, broski? What are you talking about?
Dodgers
I mean,
in 5. You guys are winning on luck and one guy. We'll see. You could be right. You could be right. The Dodgers are lethal. You could be right, but again, we'll see. We'll see. I do the trash talking after series.
I mean, I'm not even talking about the Dodgers in 5 parks. I mean, I think they could win in 5 if everything goes right for them. But
Oh, you're saying the luck part?
The fact that luck in one guy, the Mets are not winning on one guy. Yes, Lindor
no, but
had
here's
the
the
big
thing. Time out. Here's the thing. Edgar, who do you think should be the MVP then? Who's the league MVP if the Mets are running on one guy? Because you're going to say Shohei Ohtani. My guess is he would say Shohei Ohtani. But if the Mets are running on one guy, why isn't Lindor? Why wouldn't you say Lindor then? How about that? You would say Ohtani, exactly. So take a dirt nap. Listen, I'm all for the banter, the back and forth. The Dodgers are a good team, and again, maybe he's right that the Dodgers win 5, maybe, but we wait to do the trash talking around here. I'm not gonna talk trash, and I'm not gonna walk into this series thinking that the Mets are gonna just steamroll them. It's gonna be a tight series in my opinion, and again, if he's right, he's right. But I want to roll with confidence in my team right now. That has gave me every reason to believe in them right now, given the fact that the way they got into the playoffs, the way they were resilient against Milwaukee, the way that they just beat the Philadelphia Phillies. Right now, I got confidence in my guys. And yeah, rightfully so, you have confidence in yours. I'm not going to take that away from you. But we'll see. But to sit here and say the Mets are a one-guy team, but then say Ohtani should be the MVP, the math isn't mathing on that one. That doesn't really connect. Because the definition of MVP is most valuable player. If you're saying the Mets are only here because of one guy, then Lindor should win MVP in your books. But that's neither here nor there. We're not here to have that conversation. For right now, listen, though, yeah, I mean, if the Mets are going to run off of one guy, then yeah, you're right. The Mets are going to lose in 5. But I don't think they're going to. Because
they haven't shown that so far this postseason. Every guy's had a big game. No matter they win or lose. I mean, Pete Alonso again has showed up, hit the big home run in Game 3 in the wild card series. Vientos 2-run home runs in Game 2 of the Philly series. Yes, they lost, but he was a key reason why they were in that game. And then the pitching staff has kept them in games. I mean, like we said, Senga and Peterson did a hell of a job in Game 1 to keep him in that game. Quintana for 2 games in this postseason, and we were shitting on Jose Quintana this whole season, saying we got to get rid of him. And he kept them in Game 3 of the wild card series against the Brewers, and he kept them in that game against the Phillies in Game 4. Everybody this run so far has done their part, which is what World Series teams do. Everybody on that roster has got to play their key part, except for Danny Young and Adam Ottavino. But they're doing a good job at cheerleading out of the bullpen, so at least they're doing something.
Yeah, at least they're doing this well. Yeah. At least like they're doing the slap ass Sully well. At least.
But look, I want to keep winning. I want to keep winning series at home. I mean, listen, they took Game 4, they won that series, and that was the first time the Mets closed out a playoff series since 2000 in the NLCS against the Cardinals. And that was across the parking lot. That was in Shea Stadium. That wasn't even in Citi Field. So, but let's keep on doing that because Citi Field was rocking in those 2 games. And the atmosphere when Citi Field gets going is just, it's on a whole nother level.
Yeah, without Avino, less is more. Also, since we're speaking about bullpen cheerleaders right now, since we didn't mention him once this episode, shout out Brooks Raley. It's a requirement. Shout out Denell Nunez. It's a requirement that they get brought up at least once. I want to know what the hell is happening with my guy Denell, though, right now. He wasn't there for the player introductions. What is Denell Nunez doing right now? Because I'm seeing him post on his Instagram story the final scores and everything. Where are you, my man? Where's Nunez? Because did he get surgery? Because if he didn't get surgery, ramp up to get back for the World Series, my man.
Stearns is fixing him up in the lab right now. He's doing like at the end of Revenge of the Sith when they were transforming Anakin into Vader.
If he didn't get surgery, Nunez needs to be back for the World Series. We need my goat back. But do you have anything to add on before we wrap up the episode?
4 more games until a World Series appearance. 4 more. It's a tough series, but listen, this team has showed resilience, and this team has shown that they could keep up with the best teams in the MLB because their gauntlet run that they've gone on is it's impressive. You know, you beat the Braves to get to the playoffs. You go to Milwaukee, and again, a house of horrors. You go in there, you take 2 out of 3. You beat a tough Phillies team, arguably the best team in the National League, and listen, you got to face another tough team. And listen, you want to win a World Series, you got to go through the best teams. And right now, the Mets are doing that. And like I was saying before, I think if they find a way to get into the World Series, again, it's going to be tough. But I think if they find a way to get there, I think this team will finish the job. And again, that's not a disrespect to the Yankees or the Guardians or the Tigers, whoever comes out of the American League. I just think that this team has magic right now, and if they get there, I think they'll finish the job. But we got to take care of this series first.
I agree. And again, not to knock the other teams. I don't know. Maybe I'm downplaying what the other teams could do. I fear the Dodgers more than some of those other teams. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And before I wrap it up, yeah, Iglesias getting timely hits, hustle, and everything. And yeah, that's really all we got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching. Do not forget to leave a like if you haven't already. Don't forget to subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you know when I upload or go live on the channel. And we'll see you guys in the next one.